Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel, and today we're going to be counting down the top 10 best cards within Twilight Masquerade. Twilight Masquerade is going to be a pretty big set with a lot of game-changing new cards. The format actually might shift quite a bit, including stuff like Charizard falling off and big basic decks like Miraidon coming back into the format. I'm really excited for this new set. It's going to be coming out in just a couple weeks, so I thought it'd be a great time to do a top 10 video on what I think are the top 10 best cards in the set. There's also pre-releases going on this weekend, so if you're going to any pre-releases and are looking to pick up any specific cards, hopefully this video does help you out. If y'all are new here to the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below. Help me on the road to reaching 14,000 subs. Go on to leave a like if you enjoyed the video and all that good stuff, and let me know what you think of the top 10 down below. What do you think is the best card within Twilight Masquerade? I'm interested to hear, and without further ado, let's get into the list. Starting off the top 10 ranking, I have Enhanced Hammer. Now, Enhanced Hammer definitely is going to be a really strong card to have back in the format. This card used to see quite a bit of play back when it was legal in the standard format, but this card definitely coming back is a pretty big deal because we don't really have any special energy removal effects. The only thing we have is Temple of Sinnoh, which isn't a bad card. It definitely sees play in decks that want to utilize that card like Giratina, but Enhanced Hammer is just going to be a very straightforward and strong card. One of the things that makes it so good is you can Arven for it. Any deck that can play Arven will probably be playing at least one copy of Enhanced Hammer. There are a lot of special energy that are very relevant out there. We got Mist Energy, Neo Upper Energy is looking a lot more promising now because of Dragapult, and Legacy Energy is another huge energy you want to discard with Enhanced Hammer. Enhanced Hammer will definitely be a pretty good card to have in the format once again. Well, it's not going to be super popular. Not every deck is going to play it, and most decks that will play it will just be playing a one-of copy of it, but just having a one-of copy of Enhanced Hammer will a lot of the time swing a lot of matchups in your favor. It's definitely a very important card to have back in the format. And I definitely think that it deserves to be on the top 10 list somewhere, because while it's not going to see an insane amount of play, it's a very useful card to have in the game. And the fact that you can search it out with cards like Arven to help you out in a spiff is very, very good. And definitely this card will see play. And in my opinion, will be a staple to have in the format. Definitely try to pick up a couple Enhanced Hammers if you can. Next up, we got Wellspring Mask Ogerpon. Now, this card definitely is going to be a very strong card. Now, there are going to be a couple decks that can utilize this. Obviously, Baxcalibur decks can play this. But I think the one deck that actually gets the most value out of this card is probably going to be Lugia. Yes, Lugia is going to play this card. In my opinion, it actually makes Lugia a lot more scarier to play against, mainly because of the attack Torrential Pump, which for 1 water and 2 colorless does 100 damage. You can shuffle 3 energy from this Pokemon back into your deck. If you do, this attack also does 120 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. That is a very, very strong attack. Now, that's very similar to Delphox V, which, I mean, seems like very niche play within Charizard, but the fact that this attack can be played within Lugia is so scary. With a brand new special energy coming out, that is going to make Lugia even more scarier now. This card definitely can be abused in Lugia. So now when you're playing as Lugia, you might have to consider benching Manaphy due to how strong this card is. Also, you get to recover said special energy back into your deck, so you can use it later on in the game. So this card actually will see quite a bit of play in Lugia, in my opinion, and is going to catch a lot of people off guard. So now whenever your opponent flips over Lugia V, it might be pretty relevant to try to bench a Manaphy so you don't get cheesed out of the game by a random Wellspring Mask Ogerpon attack. Now, this card could see some play within Shenpao. I don't think it will, mainly because like Greninja is just a better snipe attacker overall, but this card definitely will have its uses in the format. I definitely wanted to put it somewhere within the top 10 because I think it is a strong card. Its most useful aspect will just be used within Lugia, but it's definitely a very strong card, and it is kind of scary to have a card like this in the format because if a deck like Lugia can play it, you don't know if you want to bench Manaphy or not. And at number 8, I wanted to give a highlight to the other Ogerpon that I think is actually pretty solid, and that is the Teal Mask Ogerpon EX. This is a new grass-type attacker. Now, to be fair, Charizard EX is starting to fall off a little bit in Japan, but honestly, Charizard will still probably be good, and I think that this card will be nice to have in the format. Not only is it a good grass Pokemon, which we are kind of desperately missing right now, but it also does have some pretty cool combos that does work with quite a few other different grass attackers, or even some other attackers in general, thanks to its ability Teal Dance, where once you're turn, you can attach a grass energy from your hand to this Pokemon, and if you do, you can draw a card. We actually are seeing some play with Ogerpon, with Raging Bull, with Blissey, and also with the new Sinestcha. So this card definitely has potential with that ability alone, but the attack's also not bad. For 3 grass energy, you do 30 damage plus 30 more damage for each energy on both active Pokemon, kind of like how Espathra EX works. I definitely wanted to highlight the Teal Mask Ogerpon. Out of all the Ogerpons, this one definitely will, in my opinion, see the most amount of play, or at least will have the most amount of minor success. I do like the other Ogerpon, but the Wellspring Ogerpon really just impacts Lugia, where this card actually does have more options within the format and can, in my opinion, can see a lot more play within the meta, mainly because of how versatile it is and just how useful the ability actually is, and just having a Grass Attacker is a lot better. It's not the most broken card ever, that's why it's near the bottom of the list, but I do think it is decent enough to still make the top 10. Next up, we got Monkey Dory. Now, this card actually ended up being pretty useful within Gardevoir EX, and in my opinion, this card might have some potential within other archetypes too. It's got the ability Adrenaline Brain, where once you're in turn, if this Pokemon has any dark energy attached to it, you may move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. That's a pretty good ability. That's effectively letting you do 30 more damage, and you're also healing. So not only do you get to heal something, you also get to do 30 more damage effectively due to the ability. The ability does stack, so if somehow you're able to get multiple Monkey Dories in play, you are able to move quite a bit of damage off of your Pokemon. And this is good within decks like Gardevoir EX. The Gardevoir deck that got second place at the most recent Champions League in Japan did play this Monkey Dory. This card could be really good in a deck like Gardevoir, and it also could be good with something like Blissey EX. I think this card definitely has a lot of potential in our format and could see some play within many different decks. The ability is pretty useful, and there might be a lot of potential for this card to see play. Definitely a card you want to pick up a couple copies of, because it does seem like Monkey Dory will be a useful card to have within our format. Next up is the new supporter card, Kieran. I think this card has a lot of potential in our format because a lot of decks can actually get a lot of value out of it. It does have the effect where you can either choose to switch your active with one of your bench Pokemon, or during this turn, your Pokemon's attacks will do 30 more damage to your opponent's active EX or V Pokemon. This is very strong. It's a pretty cool reprint of the supporter card Leon, which was actually not a bad card back in the day. And having this effect in our current format, I think is actually really, really important. You got to think of the amount of decks that actually can get a lot of value out of doing 30 more damage to the active. So many different decks can actually utilize Kieran and make a lot of potential out of this card. I think the big one that definitely this card will see a lot of play in is Charizard, mainly because now Charizard can do 30 more damage, which a lot of the time can make a difference, because when you're playing against Charizard, you're trying to play around Charizard's damage output. Now Kieran can disrupt that, and also having that free switch effect will be good. But any deck can honestly play it. Even some of the new archetypes like Dragapult EX could play this. I definitely think Kieran is a supporter you want to pick up a couple copies of. And if you're somebody who likes to rock the full arts, if you pull a full art Kieran, keep that, because like I said, this card I think will be useful to have. I think there will be many decks that can get away with playing a single copy of Kieran within their deck. It's a very strong card and a very useful card to have in the format, and I think will make some impact on our format for sure, and a lot of decks will get a lot of value out of it. And yeah, it's a pretty big card to have in the format, so I definitely wanted to highlight Kieran in the top 10. And cracking into the top 5, we got Legacy Energy, the first A-Spec on this top 10 list. Legacy Energy is an insane card and is going to make Lugia a potential Tier 1 deck again. Not only is it a free Rainbow Energy effect, which Lugia has been lacking for a while now, but it also has a very good other effect where once per game, if the Pokemon this card is attached to gets knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, they take one fewer prize card for that Pokemon getting knocked out, meaning that this being on a Cinccino or a Radiant Charizard means they give up 0 prizes. Or even putting this on your own Lugia V-Star or Iron Hands EX, that's only going to give up 1 prize, which really helps swing the prize trade in your favor. Just having a Rainbow Energy back in Lugia is just so good. I mean, Lugia's been lacking Rainbow Energy. The only other option was Luminous Energy, but that doesn't work very well because you can't use it with other special energy cards because it gets canceled out. Legacy Energy doesn't get canceled out. Now, it is a once per game effect. That's just how strong this card is. It'd be a little OP if you could get it back with Roseanne's backup and then use the effect again. But like I said, Lugia now having access to a Rainbow Energy is really good. Lugia can now play Radiant Charizard more reliably and can play Iron Hands EX. You can put this on your Iron Hands EX to take 2 prizes. Now, the reason I put Wellspring Ogerpon on the top 10 was literally because of how good it will be within Lugia alongside Legacy Energy. Wellspring Ogerpon in Lugia with Legacy Energy is insane, because not only do you get the free snipe attack, you also get to put the Legacy Energy back into your deck, meaning that you get to use it again at some other point in the game. Now, I would put this card a lot higher on this list because of how good it's going to make Lugia, but it does have a few counters, and the big one are going to be the Temple of Sinnoh and the Enhanced Hammer. Enhanced Hammer is seeing quite a bit of play right now in a multitude of decks, mainly because of how good it is against Legacy Energy. Now, obviously, Enhanced Hammer will work on your opponent's turn, meaning that, you know, you still will get to attack with it, but the effect will go away. So you can lose to an Enhanced Hammer because they'll Enhanced Hammer Legacy Energy off and take the prizes for knocking out the said Pokemon. And that's why this card definitely can't really be in the top 5. It's only really good within Lugia too. I there's not many other decks that get to really play this. Like, Charizard's not going to run it, obviously. I'm not going to see Dragapult running it, or Gardevoir. It's mainly just going to be Lugia, and that's about it. But this card alone is really good in Lugia, but it is countered heavily by cards like Temple of Sinnoh and Enhanced Hammer, which Enhanced Hammer will see quite a bit of play due to how popular this card will be within Lugia, especially if Lugia ends up being a potential Tier 1 deck in our format. And cracking into the top 4 is going to be Tatsugiri, one of the best support Pokemon we have in the format currently. Its ability is so good. When it's in the active spot, you can look at the top 6 cards of your deck, reveal a supporter you find there, and put it into your hand. Combine this card with the Emergency Board tool card that gives you a free retreat pivot, and at the start of the turn, you can promote Tatsugiri and grab yourself a supporter. Really good if you want to play aggressive to find maybe boss, or just being able to just find a supporter in general is good if you're bricking, especially if your opponent Ionos you to a small hand. You can dig a little bit to find a supporter card to play the game. There's so many decks that will utilize this card. Charizard, Dragapult, even the Miraidon deck that won the Champions League played this card. This is just a very good card to have in the format, and it's one of the best support abilities we're going to have in the game right now, especially when there's a tool pivot card that works really nicely with Tatsugiri. Definitely pick up quite a few of these if you can. Not only that, it is a pre-release promo, so if you end up pulling it out of a pre-release kit, I would advise not selling it or trading it unless you really want to trade it, but don't get rid of it because it's going to be a very good card, and it actually might be a pretty valuable card too. So definitely keep your hands on the Tatsugiri promo if you pull it out of a pre-release kit, because this card is ballin' and it's one of the best cards in the set. And at the number 3 spot, we got the new Blood Moon Ursaluna, which is literally a 2-prizer version of Radiant Charizard. And Radiant Charizard is already one of the best cards in the game right now. Now we have a 2-prizer variant of it, basically. It's a colorless Pokemon with 260 HP. Yes, it's a basic Pokemon with 260 HP. That is a lot of health. And it also does have the ability Veteran's Technique, where its Blood Moon attack is going to cost 1 colorless more for each prize card your opponent has taken. Much like Radiant Charizard, does require 5 colorless energy to do Blood Moon. That does 240 damage, and then it can't attack. It's literally identical to Radiant Charizard. The ability is insane because obviously as the game goes on, this ability will get a lot stronger because the attack will cost a lot less more. It doesn't require any specific energy type like Radiant Charizard does, so you can use this in almost any deck if you really wanted to. And of course, does 240 damage, which is pretty magic numbers to hit right now. You're even knocking out bulkier EXs like Roaring Moon, Iron Hands, and even Raging Bolt. And having 260 HP makes you harder to KO back, which is kind of ridiculous. This card is so good. It's going to see a lot of play within many different decks. I think the one deck that gains the most from this card is going to be Lost Zone archetypes. Lost Zone doesn't get to really play Radiant Charizard because they got to play Radiant Greninja. Now they basically can play both Radiant Greninja and a pseudo-Radiant Charizard card with the Blood Moon Ursaluna, which is what makes this card so deadly. Definitely a card that you want to pick up a couple copies of because there are going to be many decks that will play this as a one-of. It's a very strong card and is definitely one of the best cards in the set for sure. And at the number 2 spot, we got Unfair Stamp, by far the best ace spec in the set, and it's not even close. It's literally Roxanne on an ace spec. That's ridiculous. Not only do we get Guzma on an ace spec, we now have like Roxanne on an ace spec. Now this card, you get to use at any time during the game, not just when your opponent goes down to 3 or less prizes. It's got the effect, you can only play this card when one of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn, and each player shuffles their hand into their deck. You draw 5, your opponent draws 2 cards. That's insane. This is kind of like a low-key decent draw card too, because it also gets to draw you more cards, but it also forces your opponent to 2 cards. Now you can literally play this on your second turn. Let's say your opponent goes second, they donk you. Without really having a good board state, you can immediately Unfair Stamp them to a low hand and put them out of the game, and you have more time to set up. This card will definitely change the format, mainly because of how good it is in the early game. Now, in the late game, this card's usefulness might still be very strong, don't get me wrong, but in the early game, if you can cripple your opponent's setup immediately, it's going to be game-changing. Like, you're drawing 5 cards. You get to see more cards than your opponent, while your opponent only draws 2 cards. If they're not playing, like, Bibarel or anything, this card might brick your opponent out of the game. And honestly, within this format, especially with some of the new cards coming out, I do think that it's going to be very difficult to fall behind a couple turns now because of how easy it is for the opponent to just kind of run you over and take complete dominance over a match. Now, this card is also really good with Arven. I mean, the fact you can Arven for this card is just absurd. This card is very good. Now, it is a powerful ace spec, rivaling other powerful ace specs, like, of course, Prime Catcher. So we'll have to see how much play this card actually ends up seeing, but I do expect that Unfair Stamp will be a very popular ace spec, and I wouldn't be surprised if most decks play it because of how good it is. The 2 decks that definitely can get away with it the best are Charizard and Dragapult. Those are the 2 decks that definitely come to mind, especially Charizard. Charizard Unfair Stamp sounds kind of broken, I'm not going to lie. That doesn't sound like a fun time for sure. But yeah, very strong ace spec. 100% you got to get your hands on one of these. Like Prime Catcher, it's going to see a lot of play. It's a staple ace spec they are 100% gonna want to pick up. But before we get to number 1 now, let's get into some honorable mentions. All right, and before we get to the number 1 spot, I do have some honorable mentions I want to name off real quick. The first one is the new Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon. I do think all 4 Ogerpons have potential, and this one definitely almost could have made the list. It's got a really strong ability where you prevent all damage from attacks done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon with an ability. It's basically like having a Alolan Vulpix V-Star, but with an ability, which is really, really strong. This card definitely is splashable in a lot of different decks. It's an annoying ability to deal with. Some decks alone just can't take this card down, and I definitely like this card quite a bit for how annoying it actually is. And then we got another A-Spec, Scoop Up Cyclone. I really wanted to highlight this. This is a reprinted A-Spec, and it's not like Master Ball because this reprinted A-Spec is legit actually really good. Put one of your Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your hand. That is really, really good. That's a strong effect, and being able to like immediately heal something is nuts. A lot of decks can play this. One deck that comes to mind could be Charizard EX. Now, I debated putting this on the list just because of how strong it is, but it is your A-Spec, keep in mind, so there are other good A-Specs that rival this card. So I think for now, it's going to deserve an honorable mention, but I'm sure there will be some deck that can definitely abuse this card quite a bit. Then we got Blissey EX. This card caught me off guard with how good it actually is. It had some decent showings within the Champions League, and I think Blissey is a pretty strong card. It can work with Monkey Dory, it can work with the Teal Mask Ogerpon, you can use it with Arceus. It's got that great ability, Happy Switch. Once during your turn, you can move a basic energy from your Pokemon to another one of your Pokemon, so getting to move energy around is really, really nice. Even your own attack is good, doing 180 damage and then drawing cards until you have 6 in your hand, alongside having a whopping 300 HP and being able to be synergized with Charon's Care does make Blissey pretty awesome. Iron Thorns EX I wanted to highlight quickly too. Another really cool card with the ability when it's in the active spot, Pokemon with a rule box in play have no abilities except for the future Pokemon in play, meaning that this card will shut off Pidgeot EX, Charizard's ability, shuts off Radiant Greninja, shuts off Radiant Charizard, all kinds of different abilities get shut off by Iron Thorns. There's already a quad Iron Thorns deck existing in Japan. I did want to highlight this card for how good it could be within the future archetype. And then Greninja EX, I wanted to highlight too. I think this card is not bad at all and will probably see play, especially if Miraidon actually ends up being a legit deck in the format. Just having Greninja around could be good. It's got that Ninja Blade attack. 1 energy, does 170 damage, and then unless you search a deck for a card, that's really good. You got Duplicate's Barrage, which for a water and a double turbo, discard 2 energy from it, and then you do 120 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. You can combine this with like Pidgeot and canceling clone and stuff like that to make a really interesting combo where you can snipe your opponent, especially with that first attack and Pidgeot. You can over 2 turns get like 3 cards out of your deck and allow you to pull off some pretty nutty combos. And then finally, I wanted to highlight Hyper Aroma. I was kind of, lukewarm on this this card at first, but honestly, Hyper Aroma definitely seems like a pretty strong card, and actually saw play within the Gardevoir deck that got 2nd place at the Champions League. Any deck that uses a lot of Stage 1 Pokemon for setup, I think actually can get a lot of value out of it, allowing you to search your deck for 3 Stage 1 Pokemon and put them in your hand. This is a really strong effect. I think there's actually a lot of decent uses for this card. I don't think it's one of the best cards in the set, because it's not in the top 10, but as an honorable mention, I think it deserves a placement in the honorable mentions. But with that out of the way, let's get into the number 1 spot and the best card within the set. And finally, the best card within Twilight Masquerade is by far Dragapult EX. This card just came out in Japan and has already made a massive impact. There's a lot of debate as to whether or not Dragapult is going to be our new best deck when it comes out. And I think that alone makes it the number 1 spot. I think it's a very, very strong card and is potentially going to be the best deck in the format. It's got the attack Phantom Dive, which for a fire and a psychic does 200 damage, and you can put 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like. That's a very strong effect, mainly because you do bypass Jirachi, and if this card gets set up quick enough, you are going to be KOing a lot of little Pokemon like Frigibax, Bidoof, Comfey, can get KO'd easily by this, and even stuff like Pidgey and Charmander. This is going to be a very strong card, and legit could cause some issues in the format with gatekeeping. This could gatekeep a lot of decks from actually seeing play within the format, mainly because of how strong Phantom Dive is at taking out low HP basic Pokemon. This card does have a lot of support cards too. Not only does it have a Dracloak with an insanely good ability, Airmail, like that alone. I was debating putting Dracloak on the list, but I'm just going to squeeze it with the number 1 spot. It's the same thing. But yeah, Dragapult, Dracloak are basically the number 1 spot. And then of course you have Neo Upper Energy if you want to play that as your A-Spec to Phantom Dive for 1 energy. You can play this with Mela to put energy on. You can play it with Zatu to accelerate energy to your Dragapult too. This card is just really good. And having a built-in draw engine with Dracloak and having a really good gatekeeping attack is also very good. This card actually has potentially bullied Charizard out of the format due to how good it is at dealing with Charizard, especially when you can also combine it with Technical Machine Devolution. Definitely a very scary card out in the format, and I'm definitely going to be interested to see if this card actually becomes the BDAF or not, because it definitely could gatekeep a lot of low HP basic decks from working and seeing any play within the format. But there you go, folks. That is the top 10 best cards within Twilight Masquerade. By far the best card in the set is Dragapult. If you can, try to pick yourself up 3 to 4 copies of these, because Dragapult is going to be a top tier deck in the format. But that'll be for me on today's video. If you enjoyed this top 10 video, leave a like. Let me know what you think of the list. Did I miss any cards? Were there any other cards that deserve to be on this list? There's honestly a lot of decent cards in this set. I was debating doing a top 20 list. That's just how good this set actually could be for competitive play. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. If you're new to the channel, subscribe down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and all the good stuff. And I'll catch you on another video. Bye-bye.